to yet another event in the series IHC Conversation with Authors, presented by Habitat Library and Resource Center. On behalf of India Habitat Center, I extend a warm welcome to Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, diplomat, political commentator, and best-selling author whose book, Autocrats, Charisma, Power, and Their Lives is being launched today, followed by a discussion. Ambassador Rajiv Dogra is a distinguished diplomat, author, and TV commentator. With an extensive career in Indian diplomacy, he has served as India's ambassador to multiple countries, including Romania and Italy. Renowned for his insightful writings, Ambassador Dogra has penned critically acclaimed books, including Wartime, Where Borders Bleed, India's World, and Durand's Curse, etc. His deep understanding of international affairs and engaging style has made him a sought-after speaker and commentator on global issues. Ambassador Dogra will be in conversation with Ambassador Pavan Varma, a diplomat, politician, and best-selling author. Ambassador Pavan Varma is a respected diplomat, writer, and cultural icon. He has been press secretary to the President of India, the spokesman of the Ministry of External Affairs, Joint Secretary for Africa, High Commissioner for India in Cyprus, Director of Nehru Center in London, Director General of the Indian Council for Cultural Relations, New Delhi, and Ambassador of India to Bhutan. India Habitat Center just organized launch of Hindi edition of his The Great Hindu Civilization, a must-read for everyone. Ambassador Varma is a prolific author known for his books on Indian culture, history, and spirituality. His works span various genres, including translations of classic Indian literature. As a public intellectual, he is widely recognized for his thoughtful commentary on India's cultural heritage and global standing. I am happy to announce that the session this evening will be chaired by President of India Habitat Center, Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee. Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee is a seasoned Indian diplomat with a distinguished career in foreign service. He has served as India's permanent representative to UNESCO in Paris and ambassador to Netherlands, and held numerous senior diplomatic positions. Ambassador Mukherjee is known for her expertise in multilateral diplomacy, global governance, and cultural heritage preservation. In addition to her diplomatic work, she authored insightful writings on India's foreign policy and international relations. She is widely respected for her contribution to India's role on the global stage, particularly in areas related to education, culture, and international cooperation. Thank you, Madam, for taking out time out of your busy schedule to chair this session. I now invite our dignitaries, author Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, Ambassador Pavan Varma, and President, India Habitat Center, Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee, to come to the dais. And I thank you all for joining this evening. May I now request Madam President for the opening remarks. Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee, President, India Habitat Center. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Shadab, for that introduction, and welcome all of you to India Habitat Center to Gulmohar, where we are going to be launching Ambassador Rajiv Dogra's book, Autocrats, and he will be in conversation with another best-selling author who's also my batchmate and dear friend, Ambassador Pavan Varma. I thought very hard about what should be the color of the ribbon on the book, because I always associated autocracy with the color purple. But unfortunately, the purple color was not available, and nor does Rajiv, the author, have a purple shirt. So we have to just imagine that the ribbon on the book is purple when we do the launch. It's also a red letter.
The color of my shirt is purple.
Is it?
Yeah.
I can't see it.
Considering the Party you've joined?
Thank you, Pavan. This is a red letter day for me as a very close friend of Ambassador Dogra and his family, because although he has written many, many bestsellers, this is the first time that he's actually agreed to a book launch, as his wife reminded me this morning. So I said, I don't know whether the credit goes to his wife or to me, or the combined persuasions of two ladies, but thank you very much, Ambassador Dogra, for agreeing to a book launch. This book is a must-read for everyone. I've reviewed it myself. And I realized when I was reading it that not only is it meticulously researched and a compelling narrative, but it also asks the very fundamental question as to how does a person, an individual, become an autocrat? Do they have a separate DNA? Do they have some childhood trauma? Do they have an inferiority complex like Hitler had, for instance? Or are they just plain sadists who deserve to rot in hell? This is what the book actually brings out in a very systematic manner. And it also begins with Ambassador Dogra's personal experience when he was ambassador to Romania, which he went soon after the downfall of Ceausescu. Whereas I, as a very young disarmament fellow in 1984, went to the Romania of Ceausescu. So for me, it was very interesting. The Romania of Ceausescu was a very depressing place. The electricity, the lights were always of very low voltage, and the only thing edible in the Romania of Ceausescu were cherry tomatoes. I was never able to figure out why. Clearly, there must have been some connection that most people only survived on salad and tomatoes. When Ambassador Dogra begins about his first encounter with a very well-known Romanian who was tortured, he explains that this individual told him that if every morning your head is put into a bucket full of urine and you're not allowed to wash yourself after that, so adjustable is the human mind that after some time you wait for that routine, which is again an indication that people actually can get used to autocracy. They can get used to dictatorship. They can get used to somebody taking their decisions for them. And that is also something very frightening, which the book brings out. He also talks about how there are different kinds of autocrats. And when he discusses, for instance, Mein Kampf, or when he talks about Thomas Hobbes, who wrote in the Leviathan that for they that are discontented under monarchy call it tyranny, and they that are displeased with aristocracy call it oligarchy. So also they find themselves grieved under a democracy, they call it anarchy. It's very true. What Hobbes wrote so many years ago is still true in the global scenario of today. I also was very moved by what happened to our freedom fighters after 1857 and the manner in which they were executed and the way the British wrote about it, which Ambassador Dogra brings out. Lieutenant George Cracklow, after 1857, described gleefully what happened to captured Indian rebels. He said, and I quote, "The prisoners were marched up to the guns and lashed to the muzzles. The guns exploded. On each side of the gun, about 10 yards, lay the arms torn out of the shoulders." That is British colonial rule for you. Please remember it when you go to London next time. Then there is also the whole issue of how come some resist and others don't. That question I addressed myself in my book on the Bengal partition, that conquerors came into India, conquered us, and the British, after all, at any point of time, didn't have a large presence in India. How did they control and manipulate such a large country, full of intelligent people with very high IQ? How did that happen? whereas others, like the Afghans, resisted foreign invasion till the very end. That's another very interesting part of the book that I personally was very moved about. He also talks about charisma, and that's also very important because charisma can be dark and charisma can be illuminating. When charisma is dark, it can bring about an autocrat. And that's again something which I'd like you to read about. And then the most interesting part of the book, from my perspective, which very few reviewers have written about, is the fact that he reflects on the future and talks about the hybrid dictator, the dictator created by artificial intelligence. How on earth are we going to deal with that is a question that he poses to his readers. So I found that in the end, Ambassador Dogra had come with a small lining of hope for his reader when he quotes Sahir Ludhianvi in English and says, "One day that dawn will come when after centuries of darkness, the veil of night slips, when the clouds of sorrow melt, when the ocean of contentment is immense, when sky begins to dance with joy, when the earth sings songs, surely there will be that dawn." So in my review, I put my own conclusion to Ambassador Dogra's book, which he forgave me for. I responded to that poem by my own favorite poem, because one of my favorite poets is Khalil Gibran in The Prophet. And he wrote, and I quote, "People of Orphalese, you can muffle the drum and you can loosen the strings of the lyre, but who shall command the skylark not to sing?" And that is my answer to the hybrid dictator. Finally, I am convinced the human mind will prevail. So I congratulate Ambassador Dogra. I thank Ambassador Varma. I thank all of you for being here today, including my colleagues from Habitat, who've been working very hard to organize this event. And in particular, Team Habitat, as I call them, they're all here in the room, and they've been all working with us. And I would like to first invite the launch of the book, for which I would like to invite my very distinguished colleague from the Foreign Service, Ambassador Lakshmi Puri, who is actually the batchmate of Ambassador Dogra, and a lot of his batchmates are here, to come up. And also, if Mr. Kapish Mehra is here, I can't see him because I'm not wearing my glasses. So could he please come up? Yes, you can see he's the very handsome owner of Rupa. He's right here. And we will launch the book together. This is for you.
Your book for you.
Thank you all very much. Do it from here. Thank you very much. And I would now request Ambassador Rajiv Dogra to start the discussion and start the conversation with Ambassador Pavan Varma. Rajiv, you have the floor.
But we can't talk with you as a distraction.
So I'll move back or you come here. Am I a distraction? That's a good one.
Thank you so much, all of you, for coming here. Thank you particularly my Foreign Service colleagues, my golf colleagues, my friends for dozens of years, and especially Habitat, its team, who've done a wonderful job. They've taken it upon themselves to treat it as their own function, as their own launch of their book, just as Rupa has done, headed by Kapish. But most of all, my thanks are due to two people. First, the president of Habitat, who literally forced me into launching the book, because otherwise I'm quite averse. I'm afraid of people, especially when Pavan is sitting next to me. And I'm thankful to my batchmate, Mrs. Ambassador Lakshmi Puri, who has encouraged me all along that don't worry about the title, just keep on writing the book and people will understand. So thank you so much for coming here. As also to, I think, Nalen and Alok have disappeared. They are here. To both of you. So, thanks, Pavan. You know, you were one of the first ones, perhaps the first one, to encourage me to keep on writing even if no one publishes it. So, now, once again, I'm at your mercy. Shoot off.
Thank you very much, Rajiv, Bhaswati, dear friends. Let me say that Rajiv has written a very thoughtful book. It's a contemplative analysis of the repeated rise of authoritarianism, analyzed also the causes behind it, evaluated and assessed the methodologies that are pursued by autocrats, dwelt on their sense of infallibility, their behavior when they appear to be invincible, and has also shed light on their decline. And I think this is a subject of some importance today because we are seeing many countries which are witnessing the rise of strong leaders. And often questions are raised about authoritarianism, while at the same time, I feel that the proponents of democracy and the much maligned liberal school have become smug and complacent, which is also a contributor to the rise, sometimes unchallenged, of authoritarianism. So I think this is an important book to understand the past and an important book to understand the present and perhaps the future. So let me begin, Rajiv, and I have several questions to follow, by asking you that you seem to end your entire analysis on a somewhat hopefully pessimistic note, by which I mean you quote, "Wo subah kabhi to aayegi," but you are convinced that raat lambi hogi, and you believe that this challenge will rise repeatedly. I want to understand from you why you believe that as we evolve, as perhaps democracies strengthen themselves, learning from past experience, why you are relatively pessimistic.
No, I know. First, my compliments, Pavan, that you actually read the book. No.
I know.
Second,
I know it.
Second, I want to point to one distinction, because there were two couplets I quoted. One was by Faiz, the Pakistani poet, who was pessimistic. The other was by the Indian poet who was optimistic. So as far as India is concerned, I'm very optimistic.
But the lines quoted by you of Faiz do not seem to me pessimistic at all. Lambi, दिल ना उम्मीद तो नहीं, नाकाम ही तो है, लंबी है गम की शाम मगर शाम ही तो है.
So as,
So
only,
it's quite
as only
positive.
quoting from you.
No, but that's a question that I want to ask, because unlike Bhaswati, who visited Ceausescu in 1984, and you who served as ambassador, I actually was posted there at the height of Ceausescu's power, where I went just after my first posting as a probationer, as number 2 in a small mission. It was an amazing scenario. I mean, the whole of East Europe, including the Soviet Union, was a dictatorship, but I think the most repressive dictatorship was Ceausescu. And the only recourse people in Romania and East Europe had were jokes, which they would crack and which would spread like wildfire by word of mouth. And I remember one joke, if I may start with it, which is that Ceausescu falls madly in love with Brigitte Bardot. And he pursues her relentlessly. And being Ceausescu, at some point she says, "Okay, Niku, I will marry you so long as you allow free emigration from Romania." And Ceausescu blushes and says, "My darling, you're so clever. You want to be all alone with me in Romania." And the other joke, which is important, because I'm actually narrating these jokes to prod you a little on the first question I asked. Todor Zhivkov, and all of East Europe was a dictatorship. There again, I mean, it was a matter of degree. There was this very, jokes were the only way of voicing your resentment below the radar of detection. And there was this joke about 2 policemen patrolling after the regime had raised the prices of essential commodities, which made life more difficult. So one policeman asked the other, "Brother, what do you think of the situation now?" So the other friend says, "Brother, what can I say? Same as you." To which the first says, "In that case, brother, you are under arrest." So this was the situation. But in both these countries, we saw change. Ceausescu, of course, met a terrible death. And in Bulgaria also, and in all of East Europe, you've seen the demise of dictatorship. So that's why I ask you the question. Do you feel that it is a recurring cycle, or do you think it's a diminishing cycle?
Well, your question was answered about 4,000 years back by Plato. He's mic is on है, on है.
आप उसको ऊपर करें, ऐसे.
Here I want my face to be seen. Anyway, okay. So he said, democracy, I mean, there was democracy at that time in Greece, inevitably morphs into tyranny. So that is answer 1 to your question. But there are many other answers. And one was given to me by the president of Romania. The first time I called on him, President Iliescu, was a formal affair. You know, you have a cup of tea very quickly, say how great your country is, and then walk off. The second time was a more relaxed meeting, and we got along reasonably well. When I was about to leave, I thought, let me give him a Pavan style twister. And I said, Excellency, was it the theory or the practice that failed? He didn't bat an eyelid, not even for a second. He said it was the practice. So the answer to your question is that dictatorship will come back in one form or the other, whether you call it autocracy, whether you call it soft autocracy. But people, for some reason, prefer a strongman rule. And the fact is that through history, 5,000 years of having city-states and larger states and so on, the democracy in the world has lasted only for 100 years. You might say, what about America? When I say lasted only for 100 years on an average, on a per capita basis in country terms of 200 that we are today, it means that America included, all the other countries have not had democracy for a very long time. It has been some shade of autocracy, dictatorship, kingship, whatever colonialism. That was no democracy. So unfortunately, Pavan, I think we will have recurring phases, because even today, as we speak, 70% of world's population is under some form of autocracy.
I think perhaps you're right. So, is it the gullibility of the people? Is it the guile of the leader? Is it a combination of both? Is it the failure of institutionals, which are supposed to be a check? What do you ascribe this vulnerability of democracy?
Very good question, Pavan. And this was the one which I pondered over for a very long time before I could reach any conclusion. And my editor, two editors sitting there, Yamini and Padma, helped me, brought to what I think was the right conclusion. Unless there is some kind of cooperation by the people, a man cannot push his way through others and become an autocrat or whatever you call it. To reach there, he has to convince the people, and that's the key. He has to convince that the others who are already there at the top, ruling them, are bad eggs. They are the cause why the economy is down. They are the cause why the country is facing the slide downwards. So if the power was given to him, then things will brighten up. I mean, to put it in a nutshell. The other thing is that most of these people, autocrats or whatever term you use, are very glib talkers. They're like kathavachas, that you listen to them and you're mesmerized. For that particular moment in time, you feel that there is no better solution to our ills except what he offers. And he offers them, like Napoleon said, offer them everything, do nothing. So they offer you everything, they make you an associate in the dreams they are casting. So you think that you are part of that project of making, like Trump says, making America great again, making such and such great again. So you have a sense of belonging, and that is the reason why the cycle goes on, one after the other. And the other thing, Pavan, incidentally, is that even if one dictator goes, it's not the end of dictatorship. The statistics show that after one dictator goes, he is normally replaced by someone of the hard variety.
But in that case, you are really saying that in today's time, the possibility of democracy morphing into authoritarianism is more likely, because compared to the past, perhaps, thank you, Dutta, compared to the past, many countries are genuinely democratic and have institutional safeguards to actually allow that democracy to function. And at the same time, you have periodically authoritarian leaders. I recall when Mrs. Gandhi, Indira Gandhi, declared the emergency. The first class that co-opted was surprisingly the Indian middle class. They were seduced by her promise of ending the endless cacophony of democracy, the lack of morality in democracy, the need for what is parochially called a bit of a danda in society, of trains running of time, punctuality, and somehow the unwashed masses being kept in control. And so-called hoarders and smugglers being arrested. So the middle class became co-opted. The problem, of course, in these situations, and why I'm talking of this dialectic, is that according to your research, how long does it take people to see through the fact that if today A is the victim and I am one who appreciates the perpetuator of that victimization, tomorrow I may be the victim. How long does it take? In her case, for instance, within 2.5 years, she lost her own election, her government was thrown out. It's another matter that she came back in 1980 triumphantly because those who replaced her were so completely divided. But I think people saw to it pretty fast, and in a democracy, she could be overthrown. So, this co-option that takes place by a charismatic leader with authoritarian tendencies, do you think that the people are less vigilant?
Pavan, on Mrs. Gandhi's defense, yes, emergency was an aberration to her role in politics otherwise. And when she declared emergency, she did say that I had no choice. But soon, I think within months, she realized that she should not have done this. So essentially, she was a Democrat who strayed a bit for those 2 years. But to answer your question as to how long they can go on, dictators and autocrats and so on, Salazar, Franco went on forever. In our own present age, Putin, I know, has been there for over 24 years now. Erdogan, again, the two leaders I interacted with, Erdogan has been there since the year 2000 as prime minister and then as president. And there's no sign he's going to go away. Xi of China, again, promises that he'll be there for some more time. So, dictators don't go away easily. And for the country as such, also, it is a pity because they cannot easily rise up and throw out a dictator. Is not, I mean, Romania is an exception. In fact, Romania was the only bloody revolution in entire East Europe. Otherwise, they were on a rolling on a velvet. So the prognosis is dark wherever it is, and prognosis is even more dark now because if you look at the world today, of the three superpowers, two are autocracies, Russia and China. If Trump gets elected in America, all three will be some form of autocracy. If you look at the wars that are taking place in the world today, all four are dictatorships. Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Iran if it joins in, or Syria. So the ills of the world are because of autocracies or dictatorships or any kind of hard rule.
Would you agree with me that often genuine democracies, and you've talked about this in your book, become, for reasons of national self-interest, supporters of dictatorship. You have Pinochet in Chile, which America propped up to suit them. You have the example of Israel, where America, for its own interest, the elections are due, is arming it to its teeth. You have Ukraine, where America and NATO have decided to fight till the last Ukrainian without putting their own boots on the ground. You have the entire hypocrisy of the West, which supported apartheid in South Africa for economic interests, an extremely repressive regime where Mandela remained in jail for 27 years. So this foreign intervention part of things, I mean, you have America's role in Pakistan also, and China's role in Pakistan. Do you think this is going to increase, decrease, or is it part of the new global order?
Let me start with Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan said, it is easy to conquer the world, but it is very difficult to dismount and govern the world. Unfortunately, America has chosen to govern the world in one way or the other. And America forgets one of its own former Foreign Secretary or Foreign Minister, Henry Kissinger, who had a habit of churning out more books than you and me combined. He said, it's dangerous to be America's enemy. It is fatal to be America's friend. America for a long time has taken the view that one man rule suits it, because then it has only one person to manipulate and for America to get its way. America also has self-interest as its highest motivation. The result of America's actions in Ukraine, where they say America is going to fight Russia till the last Ukrainian, is not only going to be limited to Ukraine, but it has already resulted in an economic depression in major countries like Germany
Europe,
and
West
many
Europe.
other parts of Europe. And it will also give rise to some form of autocracy, which was already there in Hungary and now in Italy and Austria, in other parts of Europe as well. So America's intervention has not been helpful at all for any country in the world. And let's hope America keeps a Bangladesh.
There's something that fascinates me, Rajiv, and I really would like your comment on it. I was posted in Moscow and was a personal witness to the disintegration of the Soviet Union. I find that dictatorships or totalitarian systems or approximations of such societies, so long as they are running the system as it exists, they are in control. But the moment they begin to tinker with it, they lose control. So Gorbachev came and started a bit of perestroika and glasnost. And the entire system quickly careened out of control. And what was Soviet Union, I still remember in a meeting in the Kremlin where I was present because Under Secretary Soviet Union, Mrs. Gandhi was explaining Punjab to Brezhnev, who had gone to sleep. And so Gromyko nudged him awake, and Brezhnev said in Russian to Gromyko, "What is she talking about? I can't understand a word she's saying." So Gromyko quickly tried to sum up Punjab, state, insurgency, problem. And while Mrs. Gandhi was speaking, and uncharacteristically in diplomatic exchanges, Brezhnev sort of in an avuncular swing of his hand told Mrs. Gandhi, "Your Excellency, I must interrupt. how do you allow such things to happen in your country? Look at the Soviet Union. Since 1917, this vast country has never had a secessionist movement which we cannot control. Well, some years later, Soviet Union became 13 countries. Punjab is very much a part of India, and I think that is because of democracy. And ultimately it triumphs. There was a time when a congressman in India could not step into Assam because there was a rather secessionist milieu there. And then democracy again more or less co-opted everybody into it. There's not been a single secessionist movement in India which has succeeded since 1947. It's because of democracy and its repeated ability to triumph. So why I'm saying this is because I question your assumption that it is going to happen repeatedly without people being aware of its possibility in greater measure as democracy strengthens itself in many countries. And at least there will be a resistance in due course.
Well, I hope I'm proved wrong, and I hope you are proved right by future historians, if ever they refer to this conversation. But having democracy for 75 years in a country's history is just a blip. And there are many hurdles that we still have to cross. One of the principal hurdles is dissatisfaction of the poor, dissatisfaction of the dispossessed. So while we may have democracy, but what does democracy mean to someone in, let's say, Chhapada or Balia? To give you a golf example, and I have two friends who will vouch for this. One of my our caddies, was returning from Bihar, and I just asked him, "Kya haal hai?" He said, "Sir, सुबह उठते हैं, ये पता नहीं दोपहर का खाना मिलेगा या नहीं, रात का तो नहीं मिलेगा." So, the hunger does not differentiate between democracy and dictatorship. The hunger differentiates between one chapati and the other. So, we are lucky that we are one whole and we take pride in India. In fact, I'll give you another example. If you're anywhere outside the subcontinent, and a Pakistani and an Indian happen to be there, and a third person asks the Pakistani, "Where are you from?" He'll say, "Main wo wale mohalle se hu." So he said, "No, where are you from?" Then he'll talk of the district. "No, I meant, where really are you from?" Then he'll say Sindh or Punjab or whatever. And at the end, when the other chap is insistent, he'll say, "Main Pakistan se hu." We start the other way around. When someone asks us, when we are abroad, we say India. And then we come to Delhi and, Gitanjali or whatever. So the big difference is, and I think we were lucky that we had leaders who taught us the cause of nationalism, cause of unity, and the cause of patience. The other, I think this is another example I must quote, even if I'm a little long on this one. People don't realize that when partition happened, Karachi, for example, 75% of business and industrial establishments were owned by Hindus and Sikhs. Lahore, more than 40% of the business and industrial establishments were owned by Hindus and Sikhs, and so on, all over Pakistan. So when people went from here, those were vacant houses, vacant industries, vacant businesses, and there was a fight to get the best. And that was the root cause of the problems Pakistan is having today, because grab what you can has not finished in Pakistan from 1947. Whereas people who came here came to a Punjab which was fallow, which was almost not quite desert, but it was not West Punjab. West Punjab was the greenery. So they had to work hard, not only in Punjab, but also in the Tarai area of UP, which they've made into a magnificent agricultural belt, or setting up industries. So it is the hard work and it is the values that our leaders of that time gave, whoever those leaders were. I wouldn't like to get into that discussion. So we are still having the benefit of that. How long it lasts is a different issue.
Rajiv, just one or two questions, then we'll take quickly 3 or 4 questions from the audience. You know, I to counter you for the sake of discussion, I think democracy, if it persists long enough, in whatever form or the other, becomes a habit. And it is not only a question of one chapati or the other. I genuinely feel it. You gave the example of Bihar. I'm fairly involved in Bihar politics, and I can assure you, without going into details, that change is afoot. The common person is saying, it's not the second chapati. I want foundational change to ensure the future of our children, and I will get it through the ballot box. So democracy does become a habit. And I think the great danger for all putative autocrats is the sense of premature invincibility that they seem to acquire. When that invincibility cracks, 2 things happen. When it is there, nothing that they can do is wrong. But when it cracks, even when they do right, it is now dubbed as wrong. And that is how democracy operates. These are people are, take UP, and you know the structure of our caste system. I know because I come from the very extreme eastern portion of UP bordering Bihar, Purvanchal belt, how stratified society is. The Dalits were clearly at the very bottom of society, helpless, powerless. Today they have become an indispensable part of the equation of democracy. And you actually had the revolution through democracy of a Dalit becoming the chief minister of UP thrice. So I still am an optimist. Even in countries where there may be transitionally dictatorship, I believe that we have more reason to hope than to despair.
Obviously, you're fighting elections in Bihar this time. But on a more serious note, Pavan, you're absolutely right. And this is a question which has engaged me entirely in the book and engaged much greater people through history. Cyrus the Great, for example. There is a tablet in United Nations celebrating what he had given to his people as his edicts, as his promise. Cyrus was a dictator, or an autocrat at least, if not entirely a dictator. He brought, you were the distraction. He brought his country to great heights, but at the same time, he did it through discipline and regulation. But he realized that that is not enough. Getting them a better standard of living, more money, and so on, that is not enough. So that is why he had set out rules on a tablet which gave them the rights that they deserved. And that has become a standard even now. That's why it's there in UN. And in fact, the famous Italian lawyer, I forget the name at the moment, around Julius Caesar's time, he was asked this question again. And he said that between people's government, autocracy or oligarchy and royalty, I think the best would be a combination of 3. Whether we can have that combination of three or a notional combination of three, I think is a difficult question to answer. But neither promises to be the entire solution, neither democracy nor autocracy nor Musharraf type
Well,
dictatorship.
you know what they say about democracy, it's the worst form of government except all the others. So, you know, whatever it is, it has its saving graces. And you have quoted Machiavelli. Of course, many of you know that 2000 years before we had Chanakya, who wrote the Arthashastra. The Arthashastra manuscript, incidentally, was lost to us till the 19th century. It was discovered in a library in Kerala. But once discovered, you found that the much touted Machiavelli had been preceded in India by 2000 years in a masterful book. And one thing is common between Machiavelli and Arthashastra and Chanakya. Both of them, in terms of national interest, advocate undemocratic means. Chanakya famously said, Sam Dam, Dand Bhed. And Machiavelli in The Prince actually speaks of much the same. But Machiavelli also wrote the discourses in which he talks about how to run a disciplined democratic state. And incidentally, in the Arthashastra, the Chanakya has so much about the duties of a king which protect the well-being of the people, to be sensitive to their concerns, to respond to their needs. So that is an ultimate question, whether this kind of practice can be followed, and whether often national self-interest becomes a reason to us become authoritarian in your own country against democratic opponents. That is also an issue. But I think we'll end it here, unless you have something to say.
No, just one small thing. Soft power, hard power, and so on is Sam Dam, Dand, and so on. But even before Chanakya, I think what Gita had in those few pages was amazing. And if you look at some of the leaders in the world, what Gita characterized various leaders continues to apply even today. In fact, in my book, India's World, which is about foreign policies of prime ministers, every chapter has a quote from Gita, and it applies so well, including in present tense. So I agree. For once, I agree with you fully.
That's good. That's a good note to end on. And we have time for 2 or 3 questions. Anyone? Yes, Sujan.
So this question is, can you speak loud enough?
Yeah.
My question is essentially addressed to the both of you. How would you essentially justify democracies acting outwardly as autocracies? In Europe, we have seen, for example, if we take Oliver Cromwell and his efforts to erode the autocratic powers of the monarch, or subsequently the Reform Act in Britain, 1832 onwards, Britain is supposed to be a genuine parliamentary democracy. And yet you've seen some of the worst excesses that Britain committed as a democracy came about in the context of India as well, in the First War of Independence and all that the gory details that you gave of our revolutionaries being made cannon fodder. You yourself mentioned apartheid. And we have seen how, autocracies, democracies act as autocracies when they are in a herd mentality as members of the UN Security Council. So how do you explain that? France is another example. After the French Revolution in the 18th century, France is the epitome of democracy. And yet
But the most rapacious colonial
has
power.
been one of the most rapacious, brutal colonial powers that you can think of, including in our region. The second part is a little more politically nuanced, that in democracies, have you considered examining, for example, the veins and strains subterranean or otherwise, that exist in democratic political processes whereby there is extreme autocracy in terms of either religious sort of control of people or caste control in terms of voting. So we've seen a lot of it in India. We call it a democracy and then people vote en masse because of a diktat given by an autocratic religious leader or, a panchayat leader or whatever it is. So can you please speak about that? Thank you.
To take the second part of your question.
Let's take two more questions.
Yeah,
and then
okay,
you can...
okay.
So, is there anyone that's at the back of the room?
You see, if you look at the democracy, there is an inherent autocracy in it, which is the autocracy of the numbers. So of the numbers, the one who wins, the winner takes all, And not being shy about talking about India, people are supporting autocracy through caste-based politics or whatever. So it seems that what Rajiv is saying is very relevant to the present situation. We cannot just wish it away. Thank you, Rajiv, for saying that. But I would like to have your comments on all this. I'm here.
Oh, okay.
There's another question from this side of the room and then back here.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting discussion. I have this question. The very title of the book gives you a feeling that autocrats by nature is something evil and democrat is a virtue. Now, if you look, and it kind of divides them into a binary. You're an autocrat, you're a democrat, so you're good, you are evil. But if you look at any political system, there are shades of democratic policies, principles, practices, and autocrats, or shades of that. You can have a dictator, or you can have this. So, I think in a real political system, it is probably not practical to talk on these two terms. You have to look at the reality of the situation is that 2/3 of the world is actually living under some form of what we understand as autocrats. We have easily agreed that the democratic, Western, developed world, which has a history of becoming what they are based on highly exploitative relationships, we are making them aspirational for us and leaving the others like that. So what would be your comment on that?
The last question, could you just pass the mic down the row?
Do you remember?
It's just here. Yeah. Please. Yeah.
Ambassador Dogra, you said that autocracy has a tendency to perpetuate itself. Does it mean that the public opinion has no role in whittling down a system which has corroded the working of the administration, cause untold hardship to people? And what about the role of world opinion? What about the role of international independent bodies like the UN? Are they defunct? Do they have no role in controlling if something goes wrong anywhere? You know that UN has already issued instructions to Israel, which is an autocratic rule, not to go on with the untold misery which it is causing to the citizens of Palestine. So I want to know about this.
So last question.
I have one question for you, Rajiv, if I may, if you permit. My question is that what happens to a democracy which claims to be democratic for its own people, I'm referring to United States, but which goes about systematically bringing out regime change as it pleases, to make America great again is not just Trump's value. Make America great again is actually cuts across all political parties in the United States. So, in theory, United States is a democracy which has just brought about regime change in our neighborhood, ignoring that regime change threatens our East, our Northeast and threatens the stability of India, which is supposed to be the greatest strategic partner of the world's greatest democracy, the United States. So, in my perspective, maybe in your next book, you should write about seeming autocrats, seeming democrats. Who's a real autocrat and who's a real democrat? And can a democracy have an autocratic neo-imperial foreign policy as United States has? Thank you. I do hope it's not being recorded because then I won't get an American visa next time. Thank you.
So starting with you, tough questions. But, you know, you're dealing with it day in and day out as Director General. The fact is that the world is composed of tribes. When they go to vote, even in America, the same system is happening. Whether it is because a rich man has ensured that people vote because of his influence, or the media controlled by those rich men or political parties are ensuring that people vote in a certain way. Or let's say in Pakistan, the role of caste, is so important that you cannot imagine. And the same in some shade of influence happens in almost every country. We are more concerned because we are present here, we see it in day-to-day fashion. As Pavan said very rightly, that as democracies, we are argumentative and we engage in it, the adda, almost on a daily way. So we see the picture in a much larger way than we should normally. So that is one. The second, I'll not go serial-wise. Second was about the role of UN. UN, as India has been saying, and as Ambassador Puri has been mentioning, along with her husband during their stay in New York, that UN is now not what it should be. Today, we are not in 1945. We are in 2024. And UN should adjust, adapt, adopt the new realities, which it refuses to do because the interests of certain powers suffer. I'll give you another example of how countries manipulate the perception of others. Ceausescu, when he was the dictator and making everyone's life miserable in Romania, but Nixon needed him for his opening to China. So someone asked him, why? How come this fellow is your friend? He says, he may be a commie, but he's our commie. So Trump, when he went to North Korea and wanted an opening, he thought Kim was the greatest gift of God to humanity. He was full of praise for him. But why just political leaders? Look at the business magnates. A couple of months back, President Xi went to America, and do you know, business magnates paid $40,000 a plate to be just seen in the same big room as Xi. And even before he took to stage, you took a long time to clap, the three of us, but even before he took to the stage, people like Bill Gates and so on who were there would not stop clapping. And all he had to say was good evening, and the clapping began again. So when outsiders give such... Tony Blair, when Putin had just taken over, he said, it is my job to like Putin. Did he ask Russians whether they really like Putin and whether they really want Blair to like Putin and announce it to the world? So half the destruction is done there. When you start listening to comments like this, the mind of people gets engineered that way. Democracy and autocracy debate, there are two full chapters in the book. One on democracy, the other on democracy versus autocracy or dictatorship. And answers are very difficult. I have tried to get to some conclusion, but you might have your own conclusion once you go through them. Pavan, you want to add?
To what?
Anything under the sun.
Were they addressed to me? To me. Yeah, no, I already touched upon that, Bhaswati, that genuine democracies, or those who believe they are genuine democracies, can be extremely authoritarian and dictatorial when they deal with foreign policy. So we really touched upon that, and you made a valid point. About caste religious diktat, I want to say to you that in any society, as Rajiv put it, there are tribal loyalties. But very often in democracies, repeatedly, those tribal loyalties also fracture for the self-interest for larger or more important change. We've seen that happen in India also. And we've had leaders come with very large majorities, which could not happen if those tribal loyalties were entirely unmovable. And they are happening again in certain parts of the country. So democracy is a constant learning lesson. And I think people benefit from every setback in order not to perhaps repeat it again, although the likelihood that they might, as Rajiv said, remains. But they are better equipped to handle what is the biggest danger today, which is authoritarianism in the garb of democracy. Thank you.
Thank you.
अच्छा शेर सुना दे एंड
दो सुनाओ.
न रात इंदौरी का है जो आज आसीन मसनद हैं, थ्रोन पे हैं, कल नहीं होंगे, किराएदार हैं, जाती मकान थोड़ी है. So that is the beauty of democracy.
पर मैं एक मैं जवाब दे दूं.
जी.
Habib Jalib ne, because some of the questions related to why can't autocracy be removed, and this happened during the time of Zia, during your time. So someone asked Habib Jalib, who's a very famous poet.
It's in your book.
This is another one. कि क्या करें? प्रोटेस्ट पे जाना चाहिए. So Habib Jalib said कि हक के लिए लड़कर मर जाना अच्छा, पर हक के लिए कोई और लड़े और मरे और अच्छा. So dictatorship is here to stay.
That's true. But कई दफे अपने हक के लिए लोग लड़ते हैं राजीव.
I agree.
चाहे आप माने ना माने.
No, I agree.
हाँ, कोई और आपके लिए मरे वो उसमें कोई आपत्ति नहीं है, जैसे अमेरिका यूक्रेन में कर रहा है. पर आई थिंक लोग मरने को भी और कुर्बानी देने के लिए भी तैयार है.
और उसके लिए आप बंगाल जाइए ना, और वहाँ देखिए, वहाँ औरतें भी मर रहे हैं.
I know.
तो आप नहीं कह सकते हो कि हम लोग तैयार नहीं है लड़ने के लिए. So thank you very much, all of you. It's a great pleasure to thank, first of all, Ambassador Dogra and Ambassador Pavan Varma, Ambassador Lakshmi Puri, and all the other friends who are here, including in strength from the Foreign Service and Rajiv's golfing friends, and Team Habitat, who's here in strength, as always. I'd like to thank all of you. I'd like to request you all to buy the copy of Rajiv's book and get it autographed by him while he's here. And I'd like to thank Rupa. I'd like to thank Kapish and Kapish's team who are all here. So please do buy a copy of the book, because it's difficult to write a book. And it's very heartening to the author when it gets sold out. So please do help us to get Rajiv's book sold out. Thank you so much.